They told me Malcolm Morgan was a monster. They said he traded in souls and never looked back. But when my brother Maxwell was seconds away from a shallow grave, I didn't care about my soul. I walked into the lion's den and offered him the only thing I had left, my freedom. I thought I was just a maid, a debt to be paid. But as the bedroom door locked behind us tonight, I realized the terrifying truth. The Mafia King didn't just want my work. He wanted my heart, my life, and he's never letting me go. The rain in Seoul felt like cold needles against Annabel's skin. She stood outside the massive iron gates of the Morgan estate, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She was only 23, but today she felt like she had lived 100 years of pain. She wasn't here for a job interview, even though she wore her neatest, most professional clothes. She was here to beg for a life. Inside the house, the air was silent and heavy. Malcolm Morgan sat in a chair made of dark leather and cold gold. At 45, his sharp Korean features looked like they were carved from ice. His eyes were dark, seeing everything and feeling nothing. He was the king of the city's shadows, a man whose name made grown men tremble. When the guards finally led Annabel into his office, the smell of expensive cigars and old money filled her lungs. She didn't look at the armed men standing by the door. She looked straight at him. Her brother, Maxwell, had made a terrible mistake. He had stolen from the wrong people who worked for Malcolm. Now, Maxwell was in a basement somewhere, bruised and bleeding. Annabel knelt on the cold marble floor. She didn't cry. She didn't have time for tears. She looked up at the Mafia King and told him she would do anything to save her brother. She offered to work for free, to give up her name, and to be his shadow. Malcolm leaned forward, his expensive suit crinkling in the quiet room. He looked at her dark skin, her brave eyes, and the way her small hands trembled. He didn't want money. He had billions. He wanted something money couldn't buy, someone he could own completely. He told her the deal was simple. "Your life for his," he whispered, his voice as smooth as silk and as sharp as a blade. Annabel didn't hesitate. She signed the paper he pushed across the desk without reading the fine print. She thought she was becoming a servant to pay off a debt. She had no idea that she had just signed away her freedom. As the guards led her away to a room upstairs, she realized the gate didn't just keep people out. It kept her in. She thought she was a maid, but she was really a prisoner of the king. Life in the Morgan mansion was like living in a golden cage. As the weeks passed, Annabel learned the daily habits of the man they called a monster. Malcolm Morgan was a man of deep silence. Every morning, he woke up at dawn to exercise in a room filled with cold silver machines. He spent the rest of his day making quiet phone calls that decided who lived or died in the city below. Annabel's new job was to be everywhere he was, but never heard. She became a ghost in a crisp maid's uniform. She served his bitter tea and washed the red bloodstains off his expensive white shirts without asking questions. She stood by the door like a statue during his secret meetings, listening to deals that made her skin crawl. But even when she tried to be invisible, Malcolm watched her. He watched the way she moved with grace despite her constant fear. Soon, he started leaving gifts she didn't want. He bought her silk dresses that cost more than her father's entire house and diamonds that felt like heavy metal shackles around her neck. Annabel didn't want jewels. She wanted her life back. One night, she finally found the courage to ask about Maxwell. She needed to know if her brother was still alive or if she was serving a man who had already broken his word. Malcolm didn't answer with words. He stood up slowly, his tall and powerful frame casting a long, dark shadow over her. He walked toward her until she was backed against the cold stone wall of the hallway. He reached out and touched a lock of her hair, his fingers lingering there for a moment too long. He told her that her brother was alive, but only as long as she stayed in her place. That place was changing. The next morning, Malcolm ordered her to move her things. He moved her room from the servants' quarters in the basement to the top floor, the same floor where he slept. When she entered the new room, she noticed something that made her heart stop. The door didn't have a lock on the inside. Every night after that, she lay awake in the dark. She could hear his heavy footsteps in the hallway, stopping right outside her door. He would stand there in the silence, waiting for something she didn't understand. The tension in the house felt like a bomb about to go off, and Annabel knew she was the one holding the match. Annabel soon realized that Malcolm's great power came with many dangerous enemies. One afternoon, a woman named Lucy arrived at the mansion. Lucy was beautiful, sharp, and very cold. She had been Malcolm's business partner for years, and many people in the city thought she would one day be his queen. When Lucy saw Annabel, her eyes turned into sharp daggers. She could not understand why a billionaire Mafia King would keep a young black maid so close to him. Lucy decided to make Annabel's life a living hell. She would intentionally drop expensive glass vases and force Annabel to clean up the pieces with her bare hands. She would spill red wine on the white carpets and laugh while Annabel scrubbed the stains on her knees. Through it all, Annabel kept her head down, but she felt Malcolm's eyes on her. He was always watching from the shadows, saying nothing. The breaking point came during a grand dinner party for the city's most dangerous men. The room was filled with power and expensive suits. As Annabel walked through the room with a tray, Lucy stuck out her foot. Annabel tripped, and a tray of crystal glasses shattered against the floor with a deafening crash. The room went silent. Lucy laughed loudly, calling Annabel a worthless pet in front of everyone. Annabel's face burned with deep shame. She felt the sharp sting of glass cutting into her knees as she tried to gather the pieces. She expected Malcolm to be embarrassed or angry at her clumsiness. Instead, he stood up slowly from the head of the table. The air in the room suddenly turned freezing. Malcolm didn't look at the mess on the floor. He looked straight at Lucy. In a voice that sounded like rolling thunder, he told Lucy to get on her knees and apologize to the maid. The powerful men in the room gasped in shock. Lucy turned pale, her confidence vanishing in an instant. Malcolm didn't wait for the apology. He walked over to Annabel, ignored the blood on her skin, and picked her up in his arms like she was made of precious gold. He carried her out of the room, leaving his guests in total silence. That night, he did not send her back to her lonely room. He took her into his own private space. As he carefully cleaned her wounds, Annabel looked up and saw a flicker of something human in his eyes for the very first time. The deep mystery of Malcolm Morgan began to unravel in the middle of a very quiet night. While cleaning, Annabel pushed a heavy bookshelf and found a hidden door behind the library. She stepped inside, her heart racing. She expected to find guns or stacks of illegal money, but instead, she found old, fatting photos. Her heart nearly stopped. The pictures were of a black woman who looked exactly like her. Annabel felt a chill run down her spine. Was this why Malcolm had chosen her? Was she just a replacement for a ghost from his past? She looked closer and found an old diary hidden under a loose floorboard. It was written in English and belonged to Malcolm's mother. As she read the messy handwriting, she realized the great Mafia King was not the man everyone thought he was. His father had been a cruel, powerful man who hated the woman he loved just because of the color of her skin. Malcolm had grown up in this very mansion watching his mother suffer in silence. He hadn't built his empire just for power. He had built it to destroy the people who had hurt her. Annabel realized that Malcolm wasn't just a cold monster. He was a man fueled by a dark, sad kind of love. Before she could leave the hidden room, the lights flickered and dimmed. Malcolm was standing in the doorway, his large frame blocking the exit. His face was unreadable, but his voice was different. He asked her why she was looking into things that could get her killed. He didn't sound angry, though. He sounded completely broken. He stepped into the small room and looked at the photos. He told her that his mother had died in this house, crying for a freedom she never received. He looked Annabel in the eyes and swore he would never let that happen to her. But his idea of protection felt heavy, like a different kind of prison. Then he told her the most shocking truth of all. He told her about her brother, Maxwell. Maxwell hadn't just stolen money to survive. He had tried to sell Malcolm's dangerous secrets to his worst enemies. Malcolm hadn't kidnapped her brother to hurt him. He had taken him to keep his own angry soldiers from killing the boy on the spot. Annabel's world flipped upside down in an instant. Her brother was the villain, and the terrifying Mafia King was actually her protector. The heavy tension in the mansion finally reached a breaking point when Maxwell was brought to the house. Annabel ran to meet him, but the man standing there wasn't the kind brother she remembered. He looked greedy and his eyes were full of anger. When he saw Annabel wearing her expensive silk clothes and diamonds, he didn't even give her a hug. Instead, he grabbed her arm and hissed, asking where the office safe was hidden. He told her that if she truly loved him, she would help him rob Malcolm and escape that very night. Annabel felt a deep, cold chill in her bones. She realized she had sold her soul to save a man who didn't care if she lived or died. She was heartbroken as she looked at the brother who was willing to use her as a tool for his own greed. Malcolm already knew what Maxwell was planning. He called Annabel into his office and placed a heavy black gun on the wooden table. He looked at her with a face as hard as stone. He told her that he had kept his side of the deal by keeping Maxwell alive. But he warned her that if her brother stepped across the line of betrayal again, he would not be able to save him. Annabel spent the rest of the night in the security room, watching the glowing screens. Her eyes widened as she saw Maxwell creeping through the dark hallways. He wasn't carrying a bag for money. He was holding a long, sharp knife. He wasn't heading for the safe. He was moving toward Malcolm's bedroom. He wanted to kill the Mafia King so he could take over the empire for himself. Annabel didn't think twice. She ran through the dark hallways, her heart screaming in her chest. She reached the bedroom door just as Maxwell raised the silver blade to strike the sleeping man. She threw her body between them, acting as a human shield. The knife cut deep into her shoulder, and she let out a sharp cry of pain. Malcolm's eyes snapped open, and his face transformed into something truly terrifying. He moved faster than a shadow, grabbing Maxwell's wrist and pinning him to the floor with incredible strength. For the first time, Annabel saw the real Mafia King in action. He didn't look like a businessman anymore. He looked like a monster who was ready to burn the whole world down just for the single drop of blood falling from Annabel's shoulder. The public humiliation came a week later, just as Annabel's shoulder was beginning to heal. Malcolm's enemies had whispered about the maid who had softened the king's hard heart. To prove he was still in control, Malcolm organized a grand gala and forced Annabel to attend. He dressed her in a gown of midnight blue and diamonds that sparkled like falling stars. But when they arrived, the elite of the city's underworld pointed and laughed. They called her a contract slave and mocked Malcolm for falling for a servant. One rival boss, a man named Chen, stepped forward with a cruel smile. He insulted Annabel's heritage and her position, trying to make Malcolm look weak in front of his own soldiers. He told the crowd that a king who sleeps with his maid is no king at all. The room held its breath and the music stopped. Annabel felt like she was shrinking, the old shame returning to burn her cheeks. She looked at the floor, wishing the earth would swallow her whole. But Malcolm didn't flinch. He walked to the center of the ballroom and took the microphone from the stage. He didn't defend his own honor, he defended hers. He announced to the entire underworld that Annabel wasn't his maid. She was the owner of his heart and the future queen of his empire. He told them that anyone who looked at her with disrespect would be dealing with his entire army. Then, he did the unthinkable. He forced the powerful Chen to kneel and kiss the hem of Annabel's dress in front of the cameras. It was a declaration of war against the old ways. The guests were silent, terrified by Malcolm's cold fury. But as they walked toward the exit, feeling like they had won, Annabel noticed something strange. Malcolm's hand, which was usually as steady as a rock, was shaking. He leaned into her ear and whispered, "Don't look back and don't stop walking. We are being watched by someone who isn't human." Just as they reached the heavy glass doors, every light in the building went pitch black. A high-pitched whistle echoed through the hall, and Annabel felt a cold hand grab her wrist, but it wasn't Malcolm's. A voice hissed in the dark. "He didn't tell you the real reason his mother died, did he?" Before she could scream, a red dot appeared on Malcolm's chest, and the sound of a silent sniper rifle hissed through the air. The gunshot echoed through the dark parking garage like a clap of thunder. Annabel screamed, her heart stopping as she saw Malcolm stagger backward. But he didn't fall. His head guard had jumped in front of him at the last second, taking the bullet meant for the king. Everything turned into a blur of noise and flashing lights. Malcolm's face was a mask of cold fury as he grabbed Annabel's hand and pushed her into the back of their armored car. As they sped away from the gala, the tires screeching against the pavement, Malcolm remained silent. His eyes were fixed on the window, watching the city lights blur by. Annabel realized the betrayal went much deeper than a single sniper in the dark. It wasn't just a rival boss trying to take a shot at the king. Someone had known exactly where they would be standing. When they finally reached a hidden safe house far from the city, the truth came out. Malcolm's phone buzzed with a video message. It was Lucy. She was sitting in Malcolm's own office, sipping his expensive wine with a cruel smile on her face. She hadn't just teamed up with the rival bosses, she had led them. She told Malcolm that his obsession with a maid had made him weak, and she was here to take everything he owned. Malcolm's voice was a low growl as he spoke into the phone. He spent hours making calls, his face looking older and more tired with every minute. Annabel tried to reach out and touch his hand, to offer him some comfort in the middle of the storm, but he pushed her away. He looked at her with eyes that were filled with a strange, painful sadness. He told her that being with him would only bring her death. He told her the deal was finally over. He had already cleared her brother's debt and sent Maxwell to a different country with enough money to start a new life. Malcolm handed Annabel a dark blue passport and a suitcase filled with more cash than she had ever seen. He told her she was finally free to go and never look back. But Annabel didn't move. She realized she didn't want the money or the freedom if it meant leaving him behind. She had fallen in love with the man who had protected her when the world turned its back. She told him she wasn't leaving his side, even if it meant facing the fire. Malcolm looked at her, his eyes filling with an emotion she had never seen before, true, raw love. But as soon as he stepped out to finish the war, the back window of the safe house shattered into 1,000 pieces. Lucy was standing there, a silver gun in her hand and a smile that looked like a scar. Lucy didn't want to kill Annabel immediately. She wanted to use her to break the king. She dragged Annabel out of the safe house and drove to the dark, foggy docks where Malcolm's main warehouse stood. The smell of salt and old rust filled the air. Lucy called Malcolm on a video screen, showing him Annabel tied to a heavy wooden chair at the very edge of the pier. She told him that if he didn't surrender his entire empire by midnight, she would drop Annabel into the freezing, deep ocean. When Malcolm arrived, he was completely alone. He walked slowly toward the edge of the pier, his long coat flapping in the cold wind. He looked tired, but his eyes were like two burning coals in the dark. He didn't bring any guns or any guards. He held up a small, glowing tablet. He told Lucy that he had already signed over every single dollar and every piece of land to a charity in his mother's name. He had nothing left to give the underworld. Lucy screamed in rage, realizing her plan to become the new Mafia Queen was falling apart. Malcolm offered her the ultimate sacrifice, his own life in exchange for Annabel's freedom. He walked closer to the edge, his hands held out. But as Lucy raised her gun to strike him, Annabel noticed something strange under the water. Dark shadows were moving beneath the pier. Suddenly, a loud siren went off. It wasn't the police, it was Malcolm's private fleet of boats. But the real twist came from the warehouse behind them. The doors kicked open, and dozens of men walked out, but they weren't Malcolm's soldiers. They were working for a mysterious third person. Lucy turned pale as she saw the person leading them. It was a face from the past that should have been dead. In the middle of the confusion, Lucy pulled the trigger. But the gun didn't fire. Malcolm had known she would try to kill him, and he had sabotaged the weapons in the warehouse days ago. As the mysterious new army moved in, Lucy lost her balance and fell back into the dark waves of the ocean. Malcolm ran to Annabel, his fingers trembling as he untied her hands. He whispered that the war was finally over and he was no longer a king. He was just a man who loved her. But as they turned to leave, a shadow blocked their path. Maxwell appeared from behind a shipping container, but he wasn't there to say goodbye. He was holding a secret that could destroy their new life before it even began. The cold wind from the ocean blew between them as Maxwell stepped out of the shadows. He wasn't the brother Annabel had grown up with. His eyes were wide and greedy. In his shaking hand, he held a small black book. It was the hidden ledger, the only record of every crime Malcolm had ever committed. Maxwell looked at the man who had saved his life and smiled a cruel, hungry smile. He told Annabel that this book was worth millions of dollars. He wanted to sell it to the highest bidder and leave Malcolm to rot in a dark prison cell forever. Annabel felt her heart tear in two. This was her flesh and blood, the brother she had sold her soul to protect. But as she looked at Malcolm, she saw a man who had burned his entire empire to the ground just to keep her safe. He didn't fight back. He just looked at Annabel and told her that the choice was hers. He would accept whatever she decided, even if it meant spending the rest of his life behind bars. Maxwell laughed and reached out his hand, telling Annabel to come with him so they could finally be rich. Annabel walked toward her brother, her footsteps heavy on the wooden pier. She looked into his eyes and saw nothing but greed. She realized that being family means more than having the same blood. It means having the same heart. She reached out as if to hug him one last time, but as she leaned in, she grabbed the silver lighter from his pocket. With a quick flick of her wrist, she touched the flame to the thin paper of the ledger. Maxwell let out a scream of horror, dropping the burning book as the orange flames swallowed the secrets inside. The wind caught the black ashes and carried them out over the dark water. The evidence was gone forever. Maxwell looked at the fire, then at his sister, and realized he had lost everything. He turned and ran into the night, a coward who would never change. Annabel turned back to Malcolm. For the first time, he wasn't a mafia king or a billionaire. He was just a man. He walked over and took her hand, his touch warm against the cold sea air. They left the city of Seoul behind that night. They moved to a small, quiet house by the blue ocean in a place where no one knew their names or their pasts. Every morning, Annabel wakes up to the sound of the waves instead of the sound of clicking locks. Malcolm still watches her, but his eyes are full of a soft, deep peace. He told her he would never let her leave his bed, not because of a debt, but because she is his home. In the end, the maid didn't just save the king, she gave him a soul. And for the first time in her life, Annabel Gold was truly, perfectly free. If you loved this story of mystery, sacrifice, and true love, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next cinematic adventure. Who do you think was the real villain, Maxwell or the Mafia King? Let us know in the comments below.